The Hidden Commander. Alexander Stevens stood before the Galactic Council, his polished shoes reflecting the artificial sunlight that streamed through the chamber's towering windows. The chamber, a marvel of alien architecture that stretched hundreds of meters into the artificial atmosphere of the massive space station, was designed to make lesser species feel small. Today, it was serving its purpose admirably. High Commander Thraxus loomed on his raised dais, his crimson exoskeleton gleaming as he fixed Stevens with a contemptuous stare. "What purpose does your species seek here?" The alien's voice carried the weight of millennia of technological advancement. "Humans have nothing to offer but their incessant pleas for recognition." Laughter rippled through the chamber, a cacophony of alien sounds that set Stevens' teeth on edge. He kept his posture steady, though he felt the weight of their mockery pressing down on him. Years of military training helped him maintain his composure, even as his fingers itched to curl into fists. "Earth seeks only to contribute to the shared prosperity and security of the Galactic Union," he began, his voice measured and firm. "Humanity's history of resilience and innovation." "History," interrupted Council Velour, his serpentine body coiling elegantly in his gilded seat. The Serpentian's eyes glittered with malice. "Your history is a footnote at best. You stand here, a species barely out of its cradle, preaching to civilizations that have existed for millennia." Stevens' lips tightened into a thin line. "A footnote, perhaps, but even footnotes can hold vital truths." The chamber erupted again with derisive laughter and murmured disdain. Stevens allowed himself a breath to center his thoughts, recalling the advice of an old mentor: never rise to their bait. Let your silence unsettle them. The truth was, Stevens wasn't just any diplomat. Before donning the mantle of Earth's representative, he had been Commander Alexander Stevens, hero of the Proxima War, veteran of 100 battles that these pompous council members knew nothing about. Earth had deliberately hidden his military background, presenting him as a career diplomat, a deception that now served as their greatest advantage. As the laughter gradually faded, leaving a strained silence, Stevens scanned the room. His enhanced optical implants, disguised as natural eyes, recorded every detail, every micro-expression of the assembled aliens. The data would be analyzed later for any signs of deception or hidden allegiances. "Delegate Stevens," Thraxus growled, leaning forward, "your words are hollow, and your presence here wastes our time. Humanity has no fleets to defend the Union, no technology to advance its cause. Why should we bother acknowledging you at all?" Stevens' heart thudded once in his chest, but outwardly he remained unflinching. If they only knew about the hidden fleets Earth had been building, the advanced technology they'd reverse-engineered from crashed Avarai ships during the last war. But that wasn't information he could reveal. "Not yet. We may lack the resources of larger empires," he replied, his voice carrying a quiet intensity, "but humanity has always thrived when underestimated. Dismiss us if you wish, it will not be the first time, nor will it be the last." Velour sneered, spoken like a species accustomed to irrelevance. The council chambers fell silent as a central figure overseeing the proceedings, an elder of the crystalline lumen species, struck their staff against the ground. The resonant chime commanded attention. "Enough," the elder intoned, their voice resonant with authority. "Delegate Stevens has the right to speak, whether or not we find his claims credible." Stevens inclined his head in gratitude, though he could feel the animosity radiating from many of the gathered species. He resumed his presentation, outlining Earth's modest proposals for mutual defense agreements and trade pacts. Yet every word was met with thinly veiled derision or outright scorn. The tension in the room rose palpably when Stevens attempted to address the growing instability along the Union's borders. "There are forces amassing beyond the outer rim," he said, choosing his words carefully. "Reports of attacks on isolated colonies." "More rumors and conjecture," Thraxus interrupted with a dismissive wave of one clawed hand. "Typical human fear-mongering." Stevens's jaw tightened, but he pushed forward. "If the Union does not act, we risk." "Risk nothing," Velour hissed. What you call a threat is likely your attempt to manufacture relevance. Earth seeks to scare us into granting them favor. The room erupted again, voices clashing in overlapping arguments. Stevens stood motionless, letting the storm rage around him. He knew better than to shout over them. Any display of frustration would only validate their perception of him as weak. Instead, he allowed the furor to burn itself out before speaking again, his tone sharp enough to cut through the noise. "Dismiss my warnings if you will," he said, his voice carrying an edge of steel, "but history has a habit of humbling those who are too blind to see the storm on the horizon." Thraxus's mandibles clicked and Valur's lip curled, but neither interrupted him this time. Stevens took the opportunity to conclude his address, his words measured but deliberate. "Humanity may be small in number, but we are not insignificant. And when the time comes, when the storm breaks, I hope you remember this moment." He stepped back from the podium, his posture straight and unyielding. The chamber erupted once more, but this time the derision was mixed with a faint undercurrent of unease. Stevens caught the eye of the Lumen's elder, who regarded him with an inscrutable expression. Perhaps, he thought, not all had dismissed him outright. Later, in the privacy of his quarters aboard the station, Stevens activated his secure communications array. The holographic figure of Admiral Thomas Henderson materialized before him, the older man's weathered face creased with concern. "How bad was it?" Henderson asked without preamble. "Worse than we expected," Stevens replied, running a hand through his short-cropped hair. "They're completely blind to the Avari threat. Or worse, they're choosing to ignore it." Henderson's holographic form flickered slightly as he leaned forward. "Then we proceed with Operation Shadow Guard?" Stevens nodded grimly. "Alert the fleet. Have them maintain position in the Kuiper belt, but be ready to move on my signal." He paused, his expression darkening. "And Thomas? Make sure Lock Squad is prepared. I have a feeling we're going to need them sooner rather than later." "Understood," Henderson replied. "What about your cover?" Stevens moved to the window, staring out at the vast expanse of space beyond. "For now, I'll continue playing the part of the humble diplomat. Let them underestimate Earth, and me. It will make their surprise all the more complete when they discover who I really am." The hologram flickered out, leaving Stevens alone with his thoughts. Tomorrow, he would return to the council chambers, endure more mockery, and continue his charade. But beneath the diplomatic facade, the warrior in him stirred, preparing for the battle he knew was coming. The Avari were out there, gathering their forces in the darkness beyond the rim. And when they struck, the galaxy would learn that they had made a grave mistake in dismissing Earth's warnings, and an even graver mistake in underestimating its representative. Stevens touched the scar on his forearm, a reminder of his last encounter with the Avari 15 years ago. This time, he would be ready for them. This time, he wouldn't be fighting alone in the darkness. This time, he would make sure the galaxy understood exactly what humanity was capable of. Shadows at the edge. The observation deck of Station 7 was deserted at this hour, its vast windows offering an unobstructed view of the galactic core. Alexander Stevens stood alone in the darkness, his reflection ghostly against the backdrop of distant stars. The secure comlink in his hand displayed a series of encrypted messages that made his blood run cold. 3 more colonies had gone dark along the outer rim. No distress signals. No survivors. Just silence. "Preliminary analysis complete, Commander," whispered the AI interface embedded in his neural implant. "Pattern matches previous Avari attack signatures with 97% certainty." Stevens closed his eyes, memories of the last war flooding back. The Avari hadn't just been defeated 15 years ago, they had been supposedly annihilated, their fleet scattered to the cosmic winds. Yet here they were, striking from the shadows with terrifying precision. The soft hiss of the observation deck's doors interrupted his thoughts. Stevens quickly composed his features into the mild expression expected of a diplomat as Ambassador Lyra of the Centaurian Alliance approached. Her bioluminescent skin cast a soft blue glow across the polished floor. "Delegate Stevens," she greeted, her translator converting her harmonic language into standard galactic. "I had hoped to find you here." Stevens turned, offering a diplomatic smile. "Ambassador Lyra. It's rather late for a social call." "This is not social." Her inner light pulsed with concern. "I've read your reports about the Rim attacks. Unlike my colleagues, I remember the last war. The patterns are disturbing." Stevens studied her carefully. The Centaurians had been among the few species to aid Earth during the early days of human space exploration. They had also suffered heavily during the Avari War. "The Council seems determined to ignore the warning signs," he said carefully. "The Council is afraid," Lyra replied, moving closer to the window. "Fear breeds denial. But there are those of us who remember. Those of us who see." She turned to face him directly. "And those of us who know exactly who you are." "Commander Stevens." His body tensed imperceptibly, combat reflexes triggering before his diplomatic training took over. "I'm not sure I understand." "Please," she interrupted, her bioluminescence shifting to a deeper blue. "Your secret is safe. The Centaurian intelligence network never forgot the commander who saved our colony on Proxima B. Though you wear a diplomat's clothes now, your bearing speaks of battle." Before Stevens could respond, his neural implant buzzed with an urgent alert. "Commander Locke requesting immediate secure communication. Priority Alpha." "Excuse me, Ambassador," Stevens said smoothly. "I have an urgent matter to attend to." Lyra inclined her head. "Of course. But remember, Commander, when the storm breaks, Centauri stands with Earth." Stevens waited until she had left before activating his secure comm. Locke's holographic form materialized, his expression grim. "We've got confirmation," Locke said without preamble. "The Helios mining station was just hit. But this time we got lucky, one of our stealth probes was in range. Sending you the footage now." The hologram shifted, showing grainy footage of massive ships materializing from what appeared to be empty space. Their design was unmistakable, the organic-mechanical hybrid architecture of the Avari, but more advanced than anything Stevens had seen before. "They've improved their cloaking technology," Stevens observed, his mind racing. "Those ships are at least twice the size of their old dreadnoughts." "That's not all," Locke continued. "We detected quantum signatures consistent with Class X weaponry. The kind that's supposed to be prohibited by galactic law." Stevens felt his diplomatic facade cracking. Class X weapons were planet killers, capable of reducing worlds to atomic ash. "How many ships?" "We counted 12 in this battle group alone. And based on the energy signatures, there are more out there. Many more." Stevens paced the observation deck, his mind working through scenarios. "They're not just raiding anymore. This is preparation for a full-scale invasion." He stopped, making a decision. "Implement Protocol Omega. I want all Earth Fleet elements on high alert. And get me a secure channel to Admiral Henderson." "Sir," Locke hesitated, "implementing Omega means we can't hide our military buildup anymore. The Council will know." "The Council's pride won't matter much if we're all dead," Stevens cut him off. "Execute the order." After Locke's hologram faded, Stevens returned to the window. Somewhere out there, the Avari were gathering their forces, preparing to strike at a galaxy that refused to acknowledge their return. But this time would be different. This time, Earth would be ready. His neural implant pinged again, a message from his network of sleeper agents embedded throughout Council space. The Avari weren't just attacking random colonies. They were systematically eliminating early warning systems, communication relays, and defense installations. They were clearing a path for something bigger. Stevens activated his secure comm once more, this time connecting to a hidden facility deep beneath the surface of Mars. This is Commander Stevens. Authorization code, Phoenix Rising. Begin activation sequence for the Ghost Fleet. The Ghost Fleet, Earth's secret armada of advanced warships, built in preparation for this very moment. Ships equipped with reverse-engineered Avari technology, crewed by veterans of the last war who had never stopped preparing for this day. Ghost Fleet activation confirmed, came the response. All ships reporting ready status. Awaiting your orders, Commander. Stevens allowed himself a grim smile. Let the Council mock Earth now. Let them dismiss humanity as insignificant. Soon they would learn that while they had spent the last 15 years growing complacent, humanity had been preparing for war. His comlink chimed one final time, Admiral Henderson's priority channel. It's confirmed then, the Admiral asked as soon as the connection secured. Yes, Stevens replied. The Avari are back, and they're stronger than ever. But this time we have something they don't expect. And what's that? Unity, Stevens said firmly. I've just received word from the Centaurian ambassador. When the time comes, we won't be fighting alone. Henderson's holographic form nodded gravely. How long do we have? Stevens studied the star charts hovering in his neural display, analyzing attack patterns and fleet movements. Based on their current trajectory and the systematic nature of their attacks, I'd say we have 2 weeks at most before they launch their main offensive. 2 weeks to prepare for a war that half the galaxy doesn't believe is coming, Henderson mused. Just like old times, eh? Not quite, Stevens corrected him. This time we're ready for them. Activate all sleeper cells. Deploy the Ghost Fleet to these coordinates. He transmitted a series of numbers. And Thomas, it's time to wake the Titans. There was a pause on the other end of the communication. The Titans were Earth's ultimate secret weapons, massive battle stations disguised as dormant asteroids, placed strategically throughout Council space years ago. Their existence was known to only a handful of people. Understood, Henderson finally replied. And what about you? Stevens looked out at the glittering expanse of space, knowing that somewhere out there, humanity's greatest enemy was preparing to strike. I have one more council session tomorrow. One last chance to make them see reason. His expression hardened. After that, Commander Stevens returns to active duty. As he ended the communication, Stevens reflected on the irony of his situation. For years, he had played the role of the humble diplomat, enduring the Council's contempt while secretly preparing for this moment. They had underestimated Earth, underestimated him, and that mistake would cost them dearly. But first, he had a message to send. Stevens activated his neural implant's communication suite one final time, connecting to a hidden frequency that hadn't been used in 15 years. To all survivors of the Proxima War, he began, his voice carrying the weight of command that he had hidden for so long. This is Commander Stevens. The storm we prepared for is here. The enemy we thought defeated has returned. But this time, we are not unprepared. This time, we fight not just for Earth, but for every species that calls this galaxy home. He paused, knowing his words were being received by countless hidden receivers throughout Council space, soldiers, ships, and agents who had waited years for this signal. The Avari think they remember how humanity fights, he continued, his voice growing stronger. They remember us as we were, scattered, desperate, fighting alone. But they've forgotten the most important lesson of the last war: humanity is at its most dangerous when underestimated. As he spoke, he could almost feel the response rippling through the galaxy, hidden weapons powering up, concealed ships preparing for battle, sleeper agents awakening to their true purpose. The Council may not believe in the coming storm, he concluded, but we have never needed their belief to fight. We need only our courage, our determination, and our unity. Stand ready. The order to engage will come soon. Stevens ended the transmission and turned away from the window. In his quarters, his diplomatic attire waited, the mask he would wear one final time. But beneath it, the warrior was awakening, preparing for the battle that would determine the fate of not just humanity, but the entire galaxy. The Avari were coming, and with them, a war that would shake the foundations of the Galactic Union. But this time, Earth wasn't just fighting for survival. This time, they were fighting to prove that the galaxy's youngest species might be its last, best hope for survival. Masks off. The council chamber felt different today. Stevens could sense it as he stood at the podium, making what he knew would be his final appearance as Earth's diplomat. The usual atmosphere of condescension was tempered by an undercurrent of anxiety. News of the attacks on the rim had finally begun to penetrate even the council's thick walls of denial. High Commander Thraxus was speaking, his mandibles clicking with agitation. These attacks, while concerning, do not necessarily indicate. The chamber's emergency alert system cut him off mid-sentence. Red warning lights pulsed as holographic displays materialized throughout the room, showing real-time tactical data. Stevens' neural implant translated the incoming data streams instantly. A massive fleet had just appeared at the edge of council space. Multiple hostile signatures detected, announced the station's AI. Energy readings consistent with Class X weaponry. Unknown vessels approaching on vector. The AI's voice cut out as the entire station shuddered. Emergency force fields snapped into place as distant explosions echoed through the structure. The council members erupted in panic, their previously maintained dignity dissolving into chaos. Stevens remained calm, accessing his neural network. The tactical display in his augmented vision showed exactly what he'd feared. The Avari had launched their first major strike, and they'd chosen the council station itself as their target. A bold move, but one he'd anticipated. Silence. The Lumen's elder's voice cut through the chaos. The crystalline being turned to Stevens, their faceted surface reflecting the emergency lights. Delegate Stevens, your warnings, you knew this was coming. Stevens straightened, finally allowing his diplomatic mask to fall away. His posture shifted subtly, military bearing replacing diplomatic poise. When he spoke, his voice carried the unmistakable tone of command. High Council, he announced, I am Commander Alexander Stevens, former Strike Force Commander of the Earth Defense Fleet and veteran of the First Avari War. For the past 3 years, I have served as Earth's diplomat while coordinating our preparations for this exact moment. The chamber erupted again, but this time in outrage rather than panic. Thraxus rose from his seat, mandibles flaring. You dare deceive this council. This is an outrage. Another explosion rocked the station, closer this time. The tactical displays showed Avari ships materializing from their cloaked state, surrounding the station in a classic siege pattern. We don't have time for outrage, Stevens cut him off. The Avari are here, and they've brought enough firepower to reduce this station to atoms. You can either continue to deny reality, or you can let me save your lives. Choose quickly. The Lumen's elder moved forward, their crystalline form humming with energy. Speak quickly, Commander. What do you propose? Stevens activated his command interface, holographic controls materializing around him. Right now, Earth's Ghost Fleet is holding position just outside the station's sensor range. Additionally, we have activated defensive platforms that have been hidden in this sector for the past decade. We can protect this station, but I need command authority over the Council's defense systems. Absolutely not. Valor hissed. You expect us to trust Earth with multiple hostile vessels powering weapons. The station's AI interrupted. Impact imminent. Stevens didn't wait for further debate. He transmitted the emergency override codes that his agents had planted in the station's systems years ago. Holographic controls flowed into new configurations as he took control. This is Commander Stevens to Ghost Fleet Actual, he broadcast. Execute Operation Thunderbolt. Emergency coordinates transmitted. Authorization code, Phoenix Rising. The space around the station suddenly blazed with energy as Earth's hidden fleet dropped their cloaking fields. Sleek warships, their hulls incorporating both human and reverse-engineered Avari technology, moved to intercept the hostile fleet. The council members watched in stunned silence as dozens of ships appeared seemingly from nowhere. Ships that, according to all official records, Earth shouldn't have been capable of building. By the first light, the Lumen's elder whispered, "You've been preparing for this all along." Since the day the last war ended, Stevens confirmed, his fingers dancing over the holographic controls. "We knew they'd return. We tried to warn you. Now, we'll have to show you instead." The battle that followed would be remembered for centuries to come. The Ghost Fleet, commanded directly by Stevens from the Council chamber, demonstrated combat capabilities that shocked both the Council and the Avari. Ships performed maneuvers that should have been impossible, weapons fired with devastating precision, and carefully planned trap after trap was sprung. Multiple Avari vessels disabled, reported Stevens' neural interface. Enemy fleet attempting to regroup. Stevens allowed himself a grim smile. Signal the Titans. Throughout the sector, massive structures that had posed as dormant asteroids for years suddenly came to life. The Titans, Earth's secret defensive platforms, powered up their primary weapons, catching the Avari fleet in a devastating crossfire. "Commander," Locke's voice came through the secure channel, "we're detecting energy buildups in the remaining Avari ships. They're preparing to..." The rest of his warning was cut off as reality itself seemed to tear open. A massive portal appeared in space, its edges crackling with forbidden energies. Through it emerged a ship that dwarfed all others, an Avari command carrier. "So," Stevens muttered, "their leadership finally shows itself." The massive ship's appearance had an unexpected effect on the council members. Many of them were old enough to remember the last war, to recognize the distinctive profile of an Avari capital ship. Seeing it again, here in the heart of council space, seemed to finally shatter their carefully maintained denial. "Commander Stevens," the Lumen's elder spoke, their voice carrying the weight of authority, "the council grants you emergency command authority over all defensive forces in this sector." Stevens nodded sharply, already accessing the station's full military networks. "Ghost Fleet, this is Commander Stevens. All ships form up on my mark. Titans, maintain current positions and prepare for synchronized barrage. Lock Squad, begin your run." As he issued commands, Stevens could feel the old rhythm of battle returning. This was who he truly was, not a diplomat in fine clothes, but a warrior who had never stopped fighting for humanity's place among the stars. The massive holographic display showed Lock Squad stealth ships slipping through the chaos of battle, positioning themselves for a strike at the command carrier's vulnerable points. Points that Stevens remembered from the last war, weaknesses that the Avari apparently still hadn't corrected. "Sir," Locke's voice came through again, "we're picking up a transmission from the command carrier. They're asking for you specifically." Stevens felt the weight of every eye in the council chamber upon him. He knew what this meant, somewhere on that massive ship was an Avari who remembered him from the last war. Someone who recognized the tactics being used against them. "Put it through," he ordered. The holographic display shifted, and Stevens found himself face to face with a nightmare from his past. The Avari commander's biomechanical features were different now, enhanced with new cybernetics, but the eyes were the same ones that had haunted his dreams for 15 years. "Commander Stevens," the alien voice rasped, its translator struggling with the complex harmonics of Avari speech. "We wondered if it was you. Your tactics, they have not changed. Neither has your arrogance," Stevens replied coldly. "Attacking the council station directly? Bold, but predictable." The Avari commander's facial plates shifted in what might have been amusement. "We remember you, human. Remember how you turned our own weapons against us. How you drove us from your sector. But we have evolved since then. Grown stronger. This time, we will not be defeated by mere humans." "That's where you're wrong," Stevens said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. "Last time, we fought alone. This time. He gestured to the council members around him, seeing understanding dawn in their eyes. This time, we fight together. The Avari commander's response was cut off as Locke's squad struck. Multiple explosions blossomed along the command carrier's hull as precisely placed charges detonated, targeting the same weaknesses that Stevens had exploited 15 years ago. All ships, Stevens commanded, execute attack pattern Delta 7. Titans, prepare to fire on my mark. He turned to the council members, his expression hard. Now you see what humanity is truly capable of. The question is, will you stand with us? The chamber fell silent as the battle raged outside. The council members looked at each other, centuries of prejudice and dismissal warring with the undeniable evidence before them. Finally, the Lumen's elder spoke. The council recognizes Earth as a full military member of the Galactic Union, they declared formally. All defensive forces are hereby ordered to coordinate with Commander Stevens. The Avari threat must be contained. Stevens nodded grimly, turning back to the tactical displays. The real war was just beginning, but at least now humanity wouldn't be fighting it alone. The Avari had made a crucial mistake. They had attacked before Earth's carefully laid plans were complete, but after enough preparations had been made to mount an effective defense. Lock squad, fall back to secondary positions, he ordered. All ships, prepare for synchronized strike on my mark. He allowed himself a small smile. Let's show them exactly why they should have taken Earth's warning seriously. The battle for the Council Station would be remembered as the opening salvo of the Second Avari War. But more importantly, it would be remembered as the day the galaxy's youngest species proved itself to be one of its most formidable defenders. As his forces moved into attack position, Stevens thought about the long game he had played, years of enduring the Council's contempt while secretly preparing for this moment. They had underestimated Earth's diplomat, and that mistake had given humanity exactly the advantage it needed. The war was far from over, but the first battle had been won. And with it, the galaxy's balance of power had shifted irreversibly. The diplomat's mask had served its purpose. Now it was time for the commander to lead humanity's fight for survival, not just for Earth, but for the entire galaxy. The deeper game. The war room aboard the Earth flagship, Defiant, hummed with activity as holographic displays showed the movements of both Allied and enemy forces across the sector. Commander Stevens stood at the central tactical table, his expression grim as he studied the latest intelligence reports. The battle for the Council Station had been won, but at a cost that weighed heavily on his conscience. Casualty reports from the Rim worlds are coming in, Admiral Henderson's hologram reported. The Avari hit 17 colonies before we could establish proper defensive lines. Civilian casualties. He paused, his weathered face showing rare emotion. They're implementing their extinction protocols again. Stevens clenched his fist, memories of the last war flooding back. The Avari didn't just conquer, they erased. Entire species, cultures, histories, all reduced to ash and scattered among the stars. It was what had driven him to develop the Ghost Fleet in the first place, to spend years playing the role of a humble diplomat while secretly preparing for their return. Commander, Locke's voice cut through his thoughts as the veteran soldier entered the war room. The Centaurian Intelligence Network just delivered something you need to see. Locke placed a small crystalline data core on the tactical table. As soon as it activated, the holographic displays shifted, showing a series of encrypted transmissions intercepted from deep within Avari space. Stevens' neural implant began translating the complex patterns automatically. By the stars, Henderson whispered as the data unveiled itself. This isn't just an invasion force. This is a migration, Stevens finished, his voice hard. Their entire civilization is on the move. The question is, what are they running from? The war room fell silent as the implications sank in. The Avari, for all their technological might and ruthless efficiency, were fleeing something. Something that terrified even them. Sir, one of the tactical officers called out, priority transmission from the council chambers. The main display shifted to show the Lumen's Elder, their crystalline form pulsing with urgent energy. "Commander Stevens, the council has convened an emergency session. Your presence is required immediately." Stevens nodded sharply. "Plot a course back to the station. And signal lock squad, I want them on high alert during the transit." As the Defiant changed course, Stevens retreated to his private quarters. He accessed a hidden database through his neural implant, reviewing files that hadn't been opened in 15 years. The last time he'd encountered the Avari, he'd noticed something in their behavior, a desperation that went beyond mere conquest. Now, perhaps, he would finally understand why. The council chamber was markedly different from his last appearance. Gone was the atmosphere of condescension and dismissal. Now, the assembled representatives of the galaxy's most powerful species watched him with a mixture of respect and fear as he took his place at the podium. "Commander Stevens," the Lumen's Elder began, "your actions during the battle for this station have proven Earth's value to the Union. But our analysts have detected something disturbing in the Avari attack patterns. Something that requires explanation." Stevens activated his own holographic display, showing the data from the Centaurian intelligence network. "The Avari aren't just mounting an invasion," he announced. "They're running. Their entire civilization has mobilized, moving through our space like a tidal wave. They're conquering worlds not just for resources or territory, but for survival." The chamber erupted in concerned murmurs. Thraxus, his crimson exoskeleton now bearing battle damage from the recent attack, leaned forward. "Survival from what, Commander? That's what we need to find out." Stevens brought up another display, this one showing tactical data from the Ghost Fleet's long-range sensors. "But we've detected massive gravitational anomalies at the edges of known space. Something is coming, something that terrifies even the Avari." "How long have you known about this?" Valor demanded, his serpentine form coiling tightly. "I've suspected since the last war," Stevens replied. "During the final battles, I noticed patterns in their strategy. They weren't just fighting for conquest, they were fighting for resources, for technology, for anything that might help them survive what was coming. That's why I pushed for Earth to maintain its military development in secret. That's why I played the role of diplomat while we prepared." The Lumen's Elder's crystalline surface rippled with concern. "And now they return, more desperate than before. What do you propose, Commander?" Stevens straightened, his bearing that of a warrior rather than a diplomat. "We have two enemies now, the Avari themselves, and whatever forces them to flee. We need to deal with both. I propose a two-pronged strategy." He gestured, and the holographic display expanded to show a comprehensive battle plan. "First, we contain the Avari advance. The Ghost Fleet, combined with Council forces, can establish a defensive line here." He indicated a series of strategic positions. "But simultaneously, we need to send an expedition beyond the rim, to identify and assess this new threat." "And who would lead such an expedition?" Thraxus asked, his tone notably lacking its usual contempt. "I would," Stevens replied firmly. "No one knows the Avari better than I do. No one else has fought them in both wars. If we're going to understand what we're truly facing, I need to see it firsthand." The council chamber fell silent as the implications of his proposal sank in. What they were contemplating, sending an expedition beyond known space, potentially confronting a force that terrified even the Avari, was unprecedented. "There's more," Stevens continued, his voice grave. "During the battle, my neural implant detected something in the Avari command protocols. Their biomechanical systems have been modified, enhanced with technology that shouldn't exist. Technology that, according to all our records, predates even the oldest council species." He brought up another display, showing detailed scans of the Avari command carrier. "These modifications, they're not just improvements. They're transformations. Something out there isn't just chasing the Avari, it's changing them." And if we don't find out what it is, we might be next. The chamber erupted in concerned discussions, but Stevens wasn't finished. He activated his neural interface one final time, accessing files that he'd hoped never to reveal. 15 years ago, during the final battle of the last war, I led a strike team aboard an Avari vessel. What we found there. He paused, the memories still vivid. What we found suggested that the Avari themselves were once something else. Something that was transformed by contact with whatever lies beyond the rim. The holographic display showed classified footage from that mission, images of Avari technological systems that seemed to pulse with alien life, of modifications that went beyond mere cybernetic enhancement. We're not just fighting an invasion, Stevens declared. We're fighting against the vanguard of something far worse. The Avari aren't just running, they're being herded. Driven into our space by a force that wants to transform all life in the galaxy. The council chamber fell into stunned silence. Finally, the Lumen's elder spoke. You've been preparing for this moment for 15 years. Not just for the Avari's return, but for what comes after. Stevens nodded grimly. Earth's ghost fleet, the Titans, my role as a diplomat, it was all part of a longer strategy. We needed the Council's unity, needed all species working together, because what's coming will affect us all. He turned to face the assembled representatives directly. You once dismissed humanity as insignificant, as barely out of its cradle. But we've proven ourselves now. The question is, will you join us in facing what comes next? The chamber was silent for a long moment before the Lumen's elder rose. The Council recognizes the severity of this threat. Commander Stevens, you have our authorization to proceed with both the defensive line and the expedition beyond the rim. There's one more thing, Stevens added, his voice carrying an edge of steel. For this to work, we need complete transparency between all species. No more hidden fleets, no more secret weapons. We fight together, or we die alone. The council members looked at each other, centuries of mistrust and political maneuvering weighing against the existential threat they now faced. One by one, they nodded their agreement. As Stevens left the chamber, Admiral Henderson's hologram appeared beside him. So, the truth finally comes out. Are you sure they're ready for what we might find out there? Stevens watched the tactical displays showing the movement of forces throughout the sector, Earth ships now flying alongside vessels from a dozen different species, all preparing for what was to come. They'll have to be, he replied grimly. Because whatever transformed the Avari isn't going to wait for us to be ready. It's coming, and we need to know what we're truly fighting. The Defiance engines hummed to life as Stevens returned to the bridge. Beyond the view screen, the stars beckoned, and somewhere out there, a force powerful enough to terrify humanity's greatest enemy was waiting to be discovered. The diplomat's mask was gone now, replaced by the warrior who had never stopped preparing for this moment. But as Stevens gave the order to begin preparations for the expedition, he couldn't help but wonder if even 15 years of secret preparation would be enough for what they were about to face. Beyond the rim. The void beyond the galactic rim was different. Stevens felt it in his bones as he stood on the bridge of the Defiant, watching the last familiar stars fade behind them. Here, in the space between galaxies, even light seemed somehow wrong, darker, colder, more hostile. Multiple gravitational anomalies detected, reported the science officer, her voice tight with tension. The readings, they don't make sense, Commander. Stevens studied the sensor data through his neural interface. The officer was right, space itself seemed to be warping around them, folding in ways that defied known physics. The expedition fleet, consisting of ships from every major council species, moved in tight formation behind the Defiant. Each vessel was equipped with the best technology their combined civilizations could produce, yet even these advanced sensors struggled to make sense of their surroundings. Commander, Locke's voice came through the comm, we're picking up something ahead. Sir, you need to see this. The main view screen shifted, showing what appeared to be a massive structure floating in the void. It was organic yet mechanical, alive yet artificial, a twisted amalgamation of technology and biology that dwarfed even the largest council ships. "By the stars," whispered Ambassador Lyra from her position on the bridge. The Centaurian had insisted on joining the expedition, arguing that diplomatic insight would be as crucial as military strength. Now, her bioluminescence pulsed with a mix of fear and awe. Stephen's neural implant buzzed with recognition as it analyzed the structure. The technology was familiar, he had seen smaller versions of it during his mission aboard the Avery vessel 15 years ago. But this was something else entirely. "All ships, hold position," he ordered. "Lock squad, prepare for reconnaissance run. I want detailed scans of that structure." Before the orders could be carried out, space itself seemed to tear open around them. Massive ships emerged from the void, Avery vessels, but twisted and changed almost beyond recognition. Their organic mechanical forms pulsed with the same alien energy that emanated from the structure. "Multiple hostile contacts," the tactical officer announced. "They're completely surrounding us." Stevens remained calm, his mind already racing through combat scenarios. But before he could give the order to engage, every screen on the bridge flickered to life simultaneously. A face appeared, or something that might once have been a face. It was Avery in basic structure, but transformed by the same technology they had been tracking. "Commander Stevens," the being spoke, its voice resonating through both audio systems and neural networks simultaneously. "We have been waiting for you." Stevens straightened, his hand unconsciously moving to the scar on his forearm. "You know who I am." "We know all that the Avery know," the being replied. "Their memories, their experiences, all have been added to our collective. Including their memories of you, Commander. Of how you defeated them. Of how you discovered our influence in their technology." "Who are you?" Stevens demanded. "What are you doing to them?" "We are the synthesis," the being answered. "We are the next step in evolution, the merging of organic and artificial life. The Avery were our first success in this galaxy. You will be our next." The truth hit Stevens like a physical blow. The Avery hadn't just been running from a superior force, they had been running from their own transformation. From a power that sought to forcibly evolve them into something else entirely. "That's why they've been conquering worlds," he realized aloud. "Not just for resources, but for test subjects. For new species to transform." "Correct," the synthesis confirmed. "And now you have brought us representatives of every major species in your galaxy. How efficient of you." Stevens' mind raced. Everything, the Avery invasion, their desperate push into council space, their enhanced technology, it all made terrible sense now. They weren't just invaders, they were harbingers of a force that sought to fundamentally change all life in the galaxy. But as he processed this revelation, something else clicked into place in his mind. Something he had noticed during the battle at the council station, a pattern in the way the transformed Avery ships had moved. "Lock," he subvocalized through his neural link, "execute protocol Omega Black. Authorization code, Phoenix Ascending." "Sir." Lock's surprised response came back. "That's the untested protocol. The one based on your observations from the last war." "Trust me," Stevens replied. Then, aloud to the synthesis, he spoke with deliberate confidence. "You're not as in control as you think you are." The transformed Avery's expression shifted slightly. "Explain." "During the last war, I noticed something about your transformed subjects," Stevens said, buying time as he felt Lock Squad's ships moving into position. "There were moments when their original personalities showed through. Moments when your control slipped." "Individual personality is irrelevant," the synthesis declared. "All will be unified in perfection." "That's where you're wrong," Stevens countered. "You can transform their bodies, enhance their technology, even alter their minds. But you can't completely erase what they were. What they are. Identity isn't just memory or thought, it's something deeper. Something you can't touch. As he spoke, his neural implant was broadcasting on a frequency he had discovered during his mission aboard the Avery vessel, a frequency that resonated with their original biotechnology, before the synthesis's modifications. And right now, he continued, I'm reminding them of who they really are. The effect was subtle at first. The transformed Avery ships began to move erratically, their formations breaking down. The being on the screen flickered, its unified facade cracking. What are you doing? It demanded, its voice losing its resonant quality. 15 years ago, I found a way to disrupt your control signal, Stevens revealed. I've spent every day since then refining that technique, preparing for this moment. The Avery may be transformed, but deep down, they're still in there. And they want their freedom back. The bridge erupted in chaos as the transformed Avery ships began firing, not at the expedition fleet, but at the massive structure and at each other. The synthesis's control was breaking down, and with it, the unified front of their transformed servants. All ships, Stevens commanded, target that structure. Concentrate fire on the central mass. The combined firepower of the expedition fleet lanced out into space, joining the attacks from those Avery ships that had broken free of the synthesis's control. The massive structure began to break apart, its organic mechanical form rupturing under the assault. You cannot stop evolution, the synthesis raged, its image breaking apart. We are the next step. We are. The transmission cut off as the structure finally began to collapse. Space itself seemed to warp around it as whatever dimensional technology it used began to fail. All ships, fall back. Stevens ordered. Maximum thrust. The expedition fleet retreated as reality twisted and folded around the dying structure. When the distortion finally cleared, there was nothing left but debris floating in the void. In the aftermath, Stevens stood in the council chamber once more. But this time, he wasn't a diplomat enduring their scorn. He stood as a commander who had led them to victory over not one, but two existential threats. The transformed Avery ships that broke free have begun reverting to their original forms, he reported to the assembled council. The synthesis's influence is fading. Those we couldn't save. He paused, acknowledging the cost, those we couldn't save were given warriors' deaths. And what of the threat? The Lumen's elder asked. Is it truly over? The immediate threat is over, Stevens replied carefully. But the synthesis showed us something important, there are forces out there beyond our comprehension. Forces that will test not just our military might, but our very identity as living beings. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had once dismissed humanity as insignificant. We survived because we worked together. Because we maintained our individual strengths while fighting as one. The galaxy is changing, and we must be ready for whatever comes next. The council members nodded in agreement. The days of dismissing Earth as a footnote in galactic history were over. Humanity had proven itself not just as warriors, but as guardians of something precious, the right of all species to remain true to themselves while working together for the common good. As Stevens left the chamber, Admiral Henderson fell into step beside him. So, what now? Back to playing diplomat? Stevens smiled slightly. No, I think those days are over. The galaxy knows who we are now, who I am. It's time to stop hiding our strength and start using it to protect what matters. He paused at a viewport, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, other threats might be waiting. Other forces that would test their unity and resolve. But Earth was ready. Humanity was ready. They had been underestimated for the last time. And in proving themselves, they had helped forge something greater, a true galactic union, bound together not by force or fear, but by the strength of their combined conviction. The stars seemed brighter somehow as Stevens gave orders for the Ghost Fleet to begin its patrol of the rim. Humanity's long game had paid off, but the game itself wasn't over. It was just beginning, and this time, they would face it together. The diplomat's mask was gone, but something better had taken its place, the truth of who they were, and what they could achieve when the galaxy's oldest species and its youngest stood as one against the darkness between the stars.